This is the Law Enforcement Community Engagement Committee in Hancock County, and today we have Chief Noel March as our guest, and we were going to start with going around and doing some brief introductions, and then Noel had asked us to talk about what the LECEC has been doing up to now and what our purpose is. And so we'll get into that next. And then Noel, you'll have a chance to speak, and we will hopefully make your graphic come up on the screen. And I'm Shemaya Laurel. I live in Gouldsboro. I'm one of the folks who's involved in the LECEC and as a community member. And I'm really, really happy to see everybody here today. And Suzanne, would you like to go next?
Okay. I'm Suzanne Jean. I live in Gouldsboro, and I'm not turning my video on because my internet connection is so unstable, but I'm a community member also of the Law Enforcement Community Engagement Committee, and my interest in being involved in this group is mainly to provide a space where law enforcement, community members, and service providers can come together to get to know each other, improve communication, and address common concerns. And I wanted to be a part of that. Okay, Becky?
Hi, Becky Wentworth. Sometimes I go by Rebecca, but Becky's fine. Well, it's been a long time since this group has emerged, and I'm trying to think of the original reasons I was so interested in it. But I come from, I don't want to say police, I don't want to use the R word, but an understanding of community policing that I have long been involved with from my childhood and other places, and wanting to see more resources. I know I'm going in some opposite directions for a lot of people, but more resources available to policing or community safety departments to enlarge their effectiveness. I'm looking for words here. Sorry, guys. Effectiveness in their, when at the moment of crises, when they have to deal with these moments of meeting, having to deal with crises or things, to have more resources available than just a police car, a computer, and a gun. I having emerged during the team building era, when all the corporations hired team building people, and I am a aquatic type person, and having watched organizations move towards the team movement and away from kind of a top-down concept, but we're all in this together. And then quick jump to the present. And then seeing the work that they've been able to do in Scarborough, I think it was, and Waldoboro, Belfast, and a few other places in Maine, moving in that direction of more outreach, and not just sort of looking at the police person as sort of the ultimate provider of social behavior, but as part of a whole team creating a safe social, how do you like all these sentences? A safe social environment. Anyway, I've done a lot of thinking on this, hence all the words. I'm sorry about all the words, but there's years and years of this. I did run for county commissioner with the very eye to open up some of those funds to restorative justice in in Hancock County, and I may actually do that again, or if I can't find somebody to, or we can't find somebody who will do the same thing from that point of view, to open up some resources. Anyway, I think that covers everything. Does it, Shemaya? Did I do it?
Thank you. That was fantastic.
Turn mine on.
Yeah, and I just want to say for each of us, when we're not speaking, if you put your mute on, it'll help with feedback issues.
Oh, that's true.
There we go. Thank you. And Doug.
Rebecca, what town do you reside? Hey, Becky, what town?
I'm here. Blue Hill. Blue Hill.
Yep, got it.
And Doug.
Okay, well,
Yes.
I'm the outsider. I'm actually in the Bangor area. I live in Herman, work in Bangor. And just very briefly, as briefly as I can, I've come to these issues in terms of law enforcement, which I paid very little attention to over the last 5 years. And so I grew up in Bangor, spent 30 years in government. I was, at one point, the title was Maine's Chief Deputy Secretary of State. I was Governor Baldacci's press secretary in the governor's office. I was his communications director for 8 years in Congress. I worked for George Mitchell many, many years ago, done other things in government. It all came to an end 5 years ago this Sunday, October 23rd, 2017. I went to jail for 137 days. After those 4.5 months, I left Penobscot County Jail to spend 15 months in the Penobscot County Adult Drug Treatment Court for my alcohol issues. I'll tell you how and why I started drinking. From my earliest recollections as a child, growing up in Bangor, Maple Street, Bangor, Maine, what could be better? And it was great, except I suffered from 2 mental illnesses that I could not tell a soul about. Not my 2 loving parents, not my 2 caring sisters, not my best friends in the world. That I suffered every day from obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety. And I just dealt with these debilitating illnesses very privately, very, very privately. I had routines and rituals, even prayers that I said to get through each day. OCD is fascinating. Rationally, you know that if you don't repeat certain things, the world probably isn't going to end, and something terrible probably isn't going to happen, but you're absolutely compelled to do it. So this was my life. It all changed, however, on 9/11, 21 years ago last month. I was working on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., right across the street from the big dome building, the Capitol, where we thought a plane might crash at any moment. One had already landed into the Pentagon. We could see smoke coming up from that building. And my OCD and anxiety went completely out of control. Because OCD is really about trying to control things. You're trying to control life so that something bad doesn't happen. And everything seemed out of control. The very next night, September 12th, 2001, I went out to a restaurant, the Little Fountain Cafe, with a friend, and we drank a lot of wine. And I didn't drink regularly. I'd never kept it in my apartment on a regular basis. And I certainly didn't self-medicate with it until then. So John became governor. I moved back to Maine, worked in the governor's office, did the deputy secretary of state thing, all the while, very privately, self-medicating. Still, people knew nothing about the mental illnesses, the self-medicating, that I'd become an alcoholic. And I was arrested 5 times without anyone finding out. I was really good at bailing myself out of jail, making up excuses as to why I didn't come home on a particular night, and continuing on. But on my 6th arrest, which again was 5 years ago this Sunday, I went to jail for those 4.5 months, and it opened my eyes to injustices and inequities and problems that I should have been paying attention to. I should have been during those 30 years in government, but I never did. And so my life has changed dramatically. Not only am I coming up on 5 years in recovery, which is fine, which is a personal thing, but I have become an advocate for change. I had no idea, and I'll stop in just a moment. I had no idea how misguided so much of our criminal legal system is. I don't call it the criminal justice system anymore, because there is so little justice for so many people and so many parties in the system, including the victims of crime. And I could talk about that for a while. I had no idea that our jails, for example, are filled with the young, the poor, and the sick. The healthy and the wealthy do not spend time in our jails. They bail themselves out, they go home, they keep their life together, and they work on their criminal legal case properly. But if you're young, poor, and sick, you sit there in jail and your life unravels, whether you're guilty or innocent, or partly guilty. Did you have an apartment? Gone. Did you have a job? Gone. Did you have a pet? Gone. Did you have possessions? Perhaps gone. Healthcare? Gone. Not because you're guilty, but simply because you're sitting in jail. Your main care is gone. Main care, gone. Did you have children? Perhaps taken. And that's because you're just sitting in jail waiting for your case to play out. That's just one example of the injustices and why we have two systems, one for people who are healthy and wealthy and one for people who are poor and sick. And again, our jails are filled with the young, the poor, and the sick. So that's just one example of why I'm involved in these issues and why I believe we need to change things dramatically, not just a little bit here and there, but dramatically. I also didn't realize, lastly, for example, that in Maine, which is low on the list of states in terms of our rate of incarceration, we're usually between 45 and 50 on the list of states, but even Maine, at our rate of incarceration, we jail and imprison more people per capita than almost every country on earth. More than Canada, Norway, England, all those countries that are similar to Maine. We incarcerate vastly more people, and it doesn't make us safer. Anyway, I'll stop there, but you get the idea. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Doug. And I just want to say that Doug has been involved, although not coming to meetings. Information that Doug has shared about things that are priorities have really had an impact on how the LECEC has gone forward. And we really appreciate it. We have never gotten to meet by Zoom before today. So we're really glad that you're here and appreciate all of your work. And I just want to say also, as part of our history, Noel, how we really got started was because of a couple of issues that came up with the sheriff's department in Hancock County. The group of us really felt like we need more avenues for discussion, and we'd like to see an opportunity to build relationships between community members. You've heard all this part, but this is where it came from. So we had an opening for discussion between law enforcement, community members, and service provider organizations. And we have quite a bit of involvement with Next Step, the domestic violence project in Hancock County and Washington County too, I think. And we're gradually, a person from Healthy Acadia is quite involved in this group. She wasn't able to be here today. So it's been a slow process. It's been a slow process for everybody to get a sense of that we really value getting to communicate with respect for everybody. We're not about anybody getting yelled at from whichever position they're in. And so that's our biggest focus right at this time.
Well, let me just say first and foremost, thank you for the introductions and for the sharing of sort of who you are in this place, in this space, and for inviting me into the group. I'm honored by that, really. So how many members would you say on and off might constitute the LECEC? as we sit here today. Understanding not everybody attends all the time, but generally, how many stakeholders do you think are affiliated?
Of people who actually come to meetings, 6 to 10,
Mhm.
who are really engaged, have, even if they don't come to meetings, we have communications outside of meetings, things like that. We have a mailing list of between 40 and 50.
Mhm.
And a number of those folks are interested and don't feel like they have the bandwidth to
Right.
be actually coming to meetings.
Well, let me introduce myself. Your work and your mission here is a very keen interest to me, professionally and personally. My name is Noel March. I don't live all that far from Doug. I live in Hamden, and I spend a fair amount of time out at Schoodic whenever I can with the family, like I think a lot of people do. So my name is Noel March, and first and foremost, I'm a husband and father of a growing family, and my career in policing in the local, county, state, and federal level is just concluding now after 40 years. When I say it's concluding, it's I'll be taking my, what we call in our business, sort of my retirement badge now, but I'm not going to conclude working. As I was joking earlier, my retirement plan is to work. But what I'm doing now with my role as an appointed faculty member to the University of Maine at Augusta in the Justice Studies discipline, and managing and directing this sort of newly emerging Community Policing Institute, which we can talk about in a moment. I feel as though I was a player for 40 years and now I'm a coach, and hopefully helping to sort of educate, communicate, and collaborate, which is the mission of, as I see it, very much of what you folks are focused upon. And so there's really so much that we can do and talk about. I've worked at a small police department. I've been the chief deputy sheriff of Knox County and Cumberland County, having been directly involved in the construction of 2 new jails in both of those, in Rockland and Portland, during the course of my career. And of course, as I sit here today, I'm the chief of police for the University of Maine in Orono, where I had been the chief of police between 2002 and 2010, when President Obama appointed me to be the United States Marshal for the District of Maine for those 8 years when he was in office. So 2000, well, everything's delayed for these appointments. Doug can probably appreciate that. So it's 2010 to 2018, I served in that capacity. And since then, I've been back with the university system at USM, UMA, UMO, and helping to lead and reform and reorganize police services with largely a protection services with an eye towards what is the new model that is best suited to communities today. Interestingly, I also consult, and I find myself consulting in colleges and universities, which are very similar to every other town and city. In so many ways. My current consulting client is the University of California, Berkeley, which has very interesting demands from its government, from its authorities, from its policing. And it's a challenge, and it's also exciting, because I view myself as a sort of a progressive revisionist in policing. I am in no way, shape, or form an abolitionist of our services that protect and serve the health, safety, and well-being. All the services, all the services that protect and serve the health, safety, and well-being of our communities. Working in partnership and in concert, our police and fire services, our mental health, our social services, our education services, all of these public services, everything from code enforcement to plumbing inspectors, all serve, and highway departments, all serve the health, safety, and well-being of our community and society as a whole. So I view those services all as spokes in a wheel, but some spokes are stronger than others. Some need to be repaired along the way of our journey, if I could use that as a metaphor. So It's interesting. Do you have members of law enforcement or town government? They're not separate from one another. They are town and county. They are government, our government, and we are the customers of that government.
Yes.
Customers be the ones who access the product or service and pay for it. So we as customers, I love it when customers come together, and LL does as well. I mean, they're constantly researching and asking so they know that their products, their quality, their services are meeting expectations of their customers. I make that analogy all the time. It's not dissimilar. It's different in the sense that the city of Ellsworth doesn't have to compete with Holden for services, not like McDonald's and Burger King in the same street, or Tim Hortons or Dunkin' Donuts, as the case may be. But we do have an obligation to our constituency. And so when members of our constituency come together, it can be very powerful. But you have to be organized sufficiently and clear and unified in your message. That's a challenge, because when different people come to the table with different priorities, sometimes that can get, bollocks up. It doesn't serve the sort of the good of the overall mission. But we can this is an intimate enough group, just the five of us. We can talk about the philosophy. It sounds like, Becky, you're very familiar with community-oriented policing and what the principles are of and what that means. And we can talk about that maybe for starters. And if that helps to sort of unify the overall vision of the group towards improved partnerships, problem solving, and organizational change. The three legs of that stool of community policing are partnerships and the strength of that, problem solving to keep things from reoccurring that we don't want to have happen, and organizational change to get unstuck from the inertia of bureaucracy and, in other metaphors, and adjust our sails to the changing winds of society. And it's often that's a challenge for bureaucracies and government to change the way we've always done things, even when demands change. Let me stop there for a moment and just get some comment or reaction from the four of you about how you feel about what I've just said.
I'd sort of like to jump on the idea that, organizational change is tied in very intimately with funding structures and people's attitudes towards taxes. Mm-hmm. So in one case, people are all for, maybe better this or whatever, but on the other hand, they're not willing to spend the money for it. Mm-hmm. So I have a strong belief that there needs to be an educational process to allow people to get familiar with the idea that they can spend more money, get better services, and actually save themselves a bunch of money down the road when they're not having to go to jail so much, or they're, bail out their kids so much, so that they can see that the front end of giving money to, good, what do you call it? Good results. Mm-hmm. Anyway. So that's kind of a sort of strong focus of mine. I'd like to see that added into with the ongoing change, that we don't just need to change the organization from within, but people's concepts of without.
I think that's where it starts. What you just said, I think, is very true. There is all too often sort of a mystery around how government works. And until you need it, it's just this, blob of people and government, and most people are kind of actually quite adverse to even wanting to be involved in it. But not only is it sort of a mystery, but there's also a fair amount of misinformation and misnomer. When we talk about policing, it's I speak from decades of experience when I say that the frame of reference that most citizens have about policing is from Thursday night television or Netflix And I mean, it enters my classroom as well. When I'll just speak more contemporary. When I have a group of students in front of me and we go through introductions like this, and why are you taking this class and what are your interests? And so many of them will say, well, I want to be a profiler. Well, and so tell me about that. And how do you, well, I've seen it on TV. Okay, you've seen actors on TV. Who else? I'm not that. Yeah, but that's what I'm thinking to myself. And who else? Well, I want to be a CSI. A CSI. Okay, what does that stand for? Well, you know, CSI. It's an acronym. Yeah, and then they try to, it's criminal. Wait a minute, no, it's crime. Wait. And so my point is that the perception doesn't often match reality. And the number of things that we think that police can do really can't do, or what they know about us or how well staffed they are. One of the biggest surprises when I share with some groups of citizens about the Maine State Police, and they're ubiquitous. That's the state police. They're the big guy, the hats and so forth, and the light blue cars. You see them everywhere. They don't work past midnight. They're home in bed. Unless it's the Maine Turnpike, which is funded by federal highway gas dollars. They're like contracted through the Maine Turnpike Authority to work 24 hours on the turnpike up to Augusta, from York to Augusta. Other than that, besides Saturday night, when most of our state police barracks stations are staffed until 2 a.m. for a scheduling reason, everybody goes home at midnight and they're on call, which means that if something emergent happens, they have to get dressed. That takes a bit to do that. Get outside, scrape their windshield of their police car, warm it up, hope that maybe they've installed a remote starter at their own expense to help that. And so in terms of response times and public expectation that we are protected 24/7, there are about 400 municipalities in Maine. And most people don't know that. Most sheriff's departments don't have a 24-hour coverage staffing either. And the cost to do so would be expensive. So they have to sort of match when are our busiest hours. Let's staff up for that. But hours that aren't as busy, we don't know that we have somebody on call. There are about 400 municipalities in the great state of Maine, 16 counties. About 400 municipalities, I think it's 110 of those municipalities have their own police department. And not all of those police departments work 24 hours a day either. So anyway, without going through the whole, breakdown demographic, here's something else I'll add, just in terms of a little more context. There are approximately 3,500 police officers in Maine. That includes game wardens, Marine Patrol officers on the coast, motor vehicle department investigators. Are not even uniformed, right? So, and of all stripes, every type and shape of police officer, not including federal FBI and so forth, but police officers with state authority and county and local authority, 3,500. As we sit here today, there are over 200 vacancies among those 3,500 police officers, because we have this other challenge of the Great Resignation and the reluctance of qualified, suitable, two important words, qualified and suitable applicants coming in the door. They're just not. They're not. And we can talk about those reasons. There's reasons for that. And retirement's coming up. Our friends in the Maine State Police in 2023 have 50 of their members are eligible for retirement in the year 2023. And word on the street is a whole bunch of them are going to take it after 25 years of service. And we have 33, last I heard, 33 vacancies right now already in the state police. And their total staffing is 350. It's the same level of staffing they had in 1971. They have in 2022 about 350. Wow, and that includes the chief and everybody else. On any given day, at best, in the Maine State Police, there are approximately 35 troopers up until midnight, 35 troopers in uniform working in Maine, providing the services they provide from Kittery to Fort Kent and West Parish to West Quaddy. 35.
Yeah.
Guys, the city of Portland has like 14 officers working just in the city. So I painted this, filled in these numbers for us to kind of get some context around any thought that we have too many police officers or overfunded is simply not true. Where we are underfunded and have been underfunded is in social services, community-based services, because public safety, of which police are a big part of, is really it's public health. When you look from the 10,000-foot view, you're with me,
Yeah, Shemaya. I
Shemaya.
wanted to say, oh, no, don't worry.
Yeah, I'll get it, I promise.
Yeah, oh, sure.
Go ahead. I mean, if you're nodding on that, echo your
What I just
feelings on what
wanted
I've just
to,
said.
yeah, to let you know some things we have had a lot of discussion about have been more of what law enforcement is doing a lot is dealing with mental health issues. And I wanted to answer your question too. We have two members of law enforcement who are often at our meetings, and one of them was very much hoping to be here today. And the other, as far as I understand, Glenn Mosier
Yeah, sure.
has been a big part of this group. And
Yeah,
John
Glenn's very
Hall,
smart.
who is
John Hall.
yeah, he's the chief of police in Southwest Harbor. And he was hoping to be here.
Well,
Something
I will say this now before we get much more. I'll join you again.
Oh, great.
And yeah. Let's not make this just a one. I mean, I got a lot happening, but I genuinely, when I say I'm interested in what you're doing, I'm interested. I'll be back.
Yeah, terrific. We had one time one of these presentation type meetings with the folks from the Waldo County Sheriff Department talking about their community liaison program. And that's another place where we got to hear a lot about how law enforcement is dealing with more social issues than what.
So some of our police agencies and municipal leaders, including the police chief, and counties as well, some are more enlightened than others. We have some dinosaurs that are, still in charge of some of these organizations, some of these agencies, and we have some forward thinkers. I look to Augusta police chief down there, Jared Mills. Man, he'd be another one, and we can invite him to talk at some point too, because he's leading some change and integration into city, and now he's acting assistant city manager as well, Doug. I mean, that's the kind of recognition, that appreciation they have for him, because he sees the bigger picture and has integrated full-time social work positions within the police department. And saying that, I want to point out as well that police in this country, the notion of having human service specialists, social workers, or addiction counselors, substance use specialists, the unhoused specialists, all of those categories, police chiefs applaud. Yes, because police have been doing everything, but all things to all people, where 911 is no longer the call of last resort. It's the first one. My kid won't go to school. That's a law, ain't it? Send a cop over here to make him go to school. I smell sewage coming from my neighbor's yard. There's a cat up a tree. I mean, on and on. 911. It's and largely, I mean, I think, Becky, you said a moment ago about educating the public, the customer, about who provides what service, and also helping our police services, I'll just speak to that, seek partners and be open to partnerships. So,
Yeah.
right, because every social disorder, every challenge of society, these past decades have landed at the feet of the police department. And to this day, there are far too many. In fact, most police departments, of which there's 18,000 in the country, still only require a GED, a clean background, and the ability to run a 1.5 miles in 12 minutes. Now, that was fine to be brave and strong when we were hiring firefighters and police officers 50 years ago. And today, firefighters still need to be brave and strong. But police officers need to be a guidance counselor, a marriage counselor, an addiction specialist, a ninja, a hostage negotiator, or a suicidal a crisis interventionist,
Right.
and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And we as a profession have been trying to keep up. Some agencies, some jurisdictions better than others. I think Bangor is doing a fine job, but they are also understaffed. But they have partners, municipal partners. But
Yeah.
Doug, go ahead. You have a thought on that?
I'll jump in. I don't think the city of Bangor is understaffed, and I don't think our police departments are under-resourced. We have just been doing things entirely wrong. We need to have a response to so many, and I know you agree with this, we need a response to so many of those calls coming from other people. You know, the police should not be responding to so many of those calls. And I know they don't want to. I've talked with Mark Hathaway a number of times. He's the police chief in Bangor, nice guy, bright, capable. I think he's forward thinking. And in fact, he's been trying this year to create, the acronym is BCAT, Bangor Citizen Assistance Team. And it would be like the Cahoots, if you're not familiar with Cahoots out in Oregon, where, and that's been ongoing for about 30 years, where a lot of the calls are responded to by a team of, it might be a social worker, it might be a paramedic, but it's not someone rolling up in a car with the lights and sirens and a person getting out with a badge and a gun. That is not wise. And we know that, and particularly if you spend time in a jail, and I tell my friends who are legislators, who are judges, who are prosecutors, who are police officers, you all need to go to jail for about 2 weeks and go to 2 or 3 jails. And by the way, spend a little time in prisons. And I'm not kidding. I've told my friends who are legislators, if you spent 2 weeks in jails, you would trip over each other racing back to the state house to get to the revisor's office where you submit legislation to create new laws or change laws. You would trip over each other because from start to finish, to one degree or another, we are doing things so wrong. And it is difficult to change government, to change bureaucracies. But I got to tell you, police departments, courts, jails, prisons, we've been doing it all wrong. And so when a call comes into 911, police officers shouldn't be rolling up to to lots of those calls. You know, we have, and I'll end this part of what I'm going to say, and this relates, Becky, to what you said too, is that we spend the money in the wrong way. You know, we keep grabbing people out of the stream who are drowning. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in and invest there. And we're not doing it. It's difficult in government to get people to understand to legislators and governors and others to understand that sometimes you got to spend money on the front end and spend more than you'd like. But you'll see the results and you'll save the money. There was one last point I was going to make, but I've lost it. But you get the idea. So many things are backwards. We spend $12 million every year in Bangor to run that jail. $12 million. And again, most of those people in that facility are young, poor, and sick. And when they sit there and sit there and sit there and they get out and they've lost their apartment, they've lost their job if they had one, and we wonder why they go back in, because we do things so wrong. It is astonishing. And it's so fascinating to me that since I got out of jail 4.5 years ago, and actually while I was in jail, so for the past 5 years, I've studied this stuff almost every single day because it's so fascinating to me. And we have done things so wrong. It's extraordinary. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you. And just before we go on, I just want to say hi to Chrissy, who joined our meeting. Noel,
Chrissy, yay!
yeah. Chrissy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Chrissy. I used to live in Maine. I now live in Puerto Rico. I'm in the Coast Guard. I do law enforcement. I did law enforcement in Maine, mostly boating safety, but here in Puerto Rico, I deal with a lot of migrant and drug cases. So that's what I do now.
And we're so glad you're here. Chrissy is one of the folks who helped to start this group in the first place.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. Chrissy, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Noel March, Semper Paratus. And,
nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. I bet you and I know people in common. Lovely to that you were able to jump on. Will you be able to stay with us for just a little bit longer?
Oh yeah, for
Good
sure.
Deal.
She's responsible for us being organized, and Shemaya, but Chrissy has some good organizational points there.
Chrissy, what's your
Yes.
last name?
Hempill, Hemphill.
Got it. Yeah. Where'd you grow up?
South Florida.
Yeah. You're closer to home now. Closer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you up here in Jonesport or were you at Southwest Harbor? Where were you?
Harbor.
Ability. Yeah. Good. All right. Well, good. We're having this conversation about so the multifaceted needs of community and how we have over these decades just narrowed down to having police be like the only resource and the first stop and the first call. And we're also talking about educating the public about exactly what the roles and responsibilities are of public service and where we have gaps. And where we have gaps are largely in the social service space. And even from education to healthcare, public health, especially. But when our police are called to be the one and only response, and there aren't other options, and in a state like Maine, and gosh, I bet in the territory of Florida as well, I mean, Puerto Rico, is probably the same in that these are jurisdictions that are not well funded with robust services. And yet we have this crescendo of everything from substance use disorder issues to unhoused homelessness, broken homes, families, education challenges where our school teachers in the same day have to take care of a cut knee and a cut wrist. And that's not what they signed up for as educators, yet the sort of the debris field of dysfunctional homes and society end up at in the arms of our teachers and our police and gosh, our hospitals and others. Doug was just talking about jails, and certainly jails have become the repository. They're the intake for our mental health system. And that's wrong.
Yeah, it is.
Inhumane.
And I will just jump in and say that's a perfect example where people say, you know, the jail is the largest mental health facility in a county. And I stop them and say, it's not a mental health care facility. In fact, it's a place where we know three things when people with mental illness end up. They stay longer than other people. their conditions worsen, and they're more apt to be the victim of abuse, not just from other residents of a jail, but from the staff. And so that's one of the many examples that I'm talking about where we do things really backward. But I got to tell you, even though more thoughtful law enforcement people these days are talking about the fact that no, police shouldn't be doing everything, and no, we shouldn't have people with mental illness in our jails. So some of the sheriffs, some of the police chiefs, other people in law enforcement are starting to say the right things in recent years, but they're part of the problem because they have been wanting more and more and more and more and more in their budgets. At some point we have to stop and say, oh, no, that money needs to go to the mental health care system. That money needs to go to the substance use disorder treatment providers. So we as law enforcement officials, not me, but those who are saying some of the right things, but they need to show leadership in other ways. For example, Penobscot County wants to add 100 to 200 more beds to the jail. So I, 3 years ago, with somebody else, created a group called No Penobscot County Jail Expansion. Again, I lived in the building for 136 days. That's not true. I spent some of the time in another jail, but I spent about 10 weeks in Penobscot County Jail. There's plenty of room in that building to do what needs to be done. But we have misguided notions about what a jail is supposed to be. People weren't supposed to be in a jail for a year or two. So law enforcement folks who say, we don't want to be the mental health treatment provider in our jails. We don't want to do this and that. You got to say, okay, we're also going to be the leaders to say, we're going to fund other things. And sometimes that means, we have to say, okay, what do we really need in our police budget? Here's an example. When did the town of Hamden or when did the city of Bangor ever really do a very, very, very thorough review of the police budget? I'll end with this. The Bangor Police Department comes to the city of Bangor and says, we need 12% more money this year, or whatever it is. And basically the city of Bangor says, you've got 9 city councilors who have a lot of things to do and they're just part-time. They basically say, okay. So I appreciate that people who are more thoughtful in law enforcement are saying, we don't want to be doing everything. And we don't, as sheriffs, we don't want to be providing mental health care services. Well, at some point, there are so many dollars, and those people need to be the leaders to say, okay, we're not going to expand our jail and ask the taxpayers for $50 or $100 million to do that. We're going to direct it elsewhere because we've got to solve these problems upstream, because it can be done better and cheaper, and it'll have longer lasting impacts. So I give some credit to the thoughtful police chiefs and others, but they need to do more. Anyway, thank you, Noel, for letting me say that.
No, of course.
So if I could just jump in a minute and say, this is where I think county commissioners can jump in and help. We have been whittled down to the idea that county commissioners are just bookkeepers, but county commissioners they have purview over a lot of these thoughts, and they can also be ambassadors, and they can be voices to the state. When windfall money comes in, we should be tapping into that for this kind of review stuff. And if nothing else, $54,000 a year for a sheriff in Hancock County to me is a disgrace. Is same for teachers. I think they need to be somewhat. Anyway, I won't go into that. So I'm back to the media thing
right,
and education, and really, getting a picture of it. Betty Johnson down in Belfast made a movie of what does a commissioner do, and she went around to all the places and that they fund, that they make the money, and we do not have to be, as commissioners, we do not have to be just parsing out enough money for people to fail. That's the way I see it. Okay.
You're right, Becky. County commissioners could be doing more, but good luck trying to. Good luck.
Well, to heck with the good luck, give us some money to do some media. That's the thing, is to get the word out to people. That's what I really think needs to happen, is some kind of, interface with media to start moving people in that concept.
And the only other thing I'll point out, I also started, on the front page of the Bangor Daily News today is a big story about Bangor considering a way to provide emergency housing for our unhoused population. We have an enormous, it took me from January to last Monday night to get the city council to at least listen to a different option. So I started this group a year ago called Penobscot County Cares, Penobscot County Cares, and we're focused on 3 issues: the unhoused and homeless population and our housing crisis, our crisis around substance use disorders, and our crisis around mental health care services. And Noel, if I get your email, I'll add you to our address. We don't send an email address. We don't send out many messages. We meet every 2 weeks. We met last night. So we've created a group. It's about 35 nonprofits and other groups to deal with those 3 issues. And why those 3 issues? Because part of the reason I created the group is because those 3 issues contribute to so many of our arrests and incarcerations. So many of our arrests and incarcerations have something to do with housing, SUD, and mental health. And the other reason we started Penobscot County Cares is because of the unprecedented influx of federal money through the American Rescue Plan Act. I don't know how much Hamden got, maybe 500,000 to $1 million. Bangor got $20 million, actually $20.4 million. Penobscot County received $29.5 million. And those dollars are COVID relief dollars that should be spent on issues that were created, or problems created by COVID or made worse by COVID. And we know that those 3 crisis areas certainly were created by or made worse by COVID. And so we're trying to convince the city of Bangor, the surrounding communities, and Penobscot County, in our case, to allocate some of that $60 million in the greater Bangor area, $60 million to those 3 crisis areas. So that's what we're doing, because again, if you want to have fewer people arrested, you want fewer people in jail, you're going to have to deal with those social issues. And I want more law enforcement officials to not only say, we don't want to be doing such and such. Well, let's figure it out. And some of that might be, you don't come to this Hamden Town Council, or you don't come to the city of Bangor's city council next year and ask for $12 million more for this or that. No, let's direct it to solving problems rather than, I always say, since I got out of jail, we do an amazing job at hiding away the people we view as problems rather than solving the problems. That's our issue. We don't solve the problems. We spend lots and lots of focus and money and resources and energy to arrest and lock up the people we view as problems. That's what we do, and it's all backwards. Thanks.
So addressing the overarching, which is very complex, deep and broad, social issues and policies and practices towards social disorder, social challenges, comes from our legislators, our governor in the state of Maine, and those who manage budget, those who manage policy, those who manage statutes, law. And I can assure you that there is every sheriff in Maine, there's 15 jails, would say we'd like them to be empty. And we don't want more money for more beds, for more bigger. And police
Well, they're
officers,
not all saying that. They're not all saying that last part. You know, we have, as I said, Sheriff Morton wants up to 200 more beds in that jail.
and
But
what's the rationale?
What's the rationale? Well, because
Overcrowding.
yeah, but you know, on any given night in Maine, this is fascinating. There are 600 to 700 empty beds in our jails. So in Penobscot County in particular, and I've looked at the arrest rates, done a lot of research, a lot of late nights in the last 5 years. We arrest so many people with crime rates dropping over the last 10 years. In Penobscot County, we keep arresting more and more people. So we don't have a capacity problem in our jail. We have an arresting problem. We have a problem of arresting.
Are more and more people committing arrestable offenses?
Well, the other thing is we have to have law enforcement use its full range of discretion. If you look at national studies, you'll see that more and more we are defaulting in this country to arresting people. We need to have law enforcement use the full range of discretion. We saw this happen at the beginning of COVID. At the beginning of COVID, our jails, our number of people in our jails dropped dramatically.
Right.
In May of 2020, there was a story in the Bangor Daily News. The title was something like, couldn't decrease capacity in our jails or people in our jails for years. Just did it in 6 weeks. Just did it in 6 weeks. The population in the Penobscot County Jail went from about 200 on average per day down to about 110.
Courts were closed, Doug.
Yep.
Courts
Absolutely.
weren't hearing cases. There's another piece of another spoke in the wheel.
Yep. But the number of people in our jails dropped because law enforcement used more of the full range of its discretion, meaning folks arrived on the scene and didn't make arrests. Sometimes they just.
So can I jump in a minute? And, you know, this is a great issue, but I would like to spend a little more time with Chrissy and what she's been doing and finding, if that's possible.
Sure.
You know, and I can chat anytime, I suppose.
Oh, we'll have more opportunity for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been very busy. You know, it's big time to migrants and drug interdictions. Migrants trying to come to Puerto Rico, I guess, is a really big issue. And everybody's busy because of the amount of people coming over. I haven't really dug into the issue or know what's going on in Dominican Republic. So I'm not sure why there's such an influx of people. But it's something I'm definitely going to look into because I'd like to know what I'm doing, you know. But other than that, I'm in port right now because, you know, just doing some maintenance on the engines and stuff. So I'm very busy out here. Not in port a lot. I feel like I'm always underway working. So that's why I haven't been so involved with the meetings because usually I'm underway.
So are you still in your college curriculum? Are you still doing that?
Say that again?
Your college curriculum that you were doing in Maine, are you still doing that?
Oh, I graduated earlier this year with my master's. Now looking into PhD programs, but I'm not really sure what I want to get my PhD in yet. Trying to do something that's just, I guess my mind is all over. Like, I love doing the community work that we were doing in Maine. Like I feel like that's my passion. So trying to figure out a degree that would help me to do more, I guess. So I don't know. I've been looking into doctorate in law and public policy, but I don't know yet.
Christy, if you want, I'm a faculty member within the University of Maine system in the justice studies space, as well as public administration. If you ever wanted to have a chat offline, sister, I can help sort of maybe navigate.
Yeah.
Does that sound good?
Yes, I took down your information. I was going to shoot you an email. So
happy to help.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
I saw what you were into and I was like, oh yeah, I want to have a conversation. I don't know many people that are like you, like an educator, and I like educating people as well. So I'd like to know the direction you took and why you took it, and how it's beneficial, and if you would have done something differently, stuff like that.
Yeah, let's set it up and take advantage of your GI Bill too, and get some tuition paid.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. So go ahead.
I just wondered if we could come back a little bit to the conversation that you and Doug were having. I was really wondering about some of your responses to the issues that Doug raised. Noel.
I mean, yeah, it's very complex. I assure you, we share the same end vision. The complexities of incarceration, however, the actuarial, the costs of having overcrowded jails that the courts and police are sending to the county, if you have insufficient beds and have to then board out at, gosh, I don't even know what it is now. Is one time it was $110 a day, and Hancock County loves getting the extra revenue from overcrowded jails, and it's this shell game of sending people back and forth and billing one another, and it becomes wildly expensive. Plus the risk of litigation for Eighth Amendment issues around overcrowded housing, and I mean, Doug, you've seen it. I've seen it. In a day room, you have cots set up that aren't. It's a day room not made for, sleeping and living, but trying to patch this, cobble together.
I've slept on those cots.
Yeah, sure. And so anyway, the tax cost to our counties, which are all property tax based, it's really, it's complex. And then some counties have a drug court where there are other options to incarceration, and there are more restorative justice practices entertained and engaged.
We need more of them.
Brunswick, there's a couple, but not everywhere. And it's these pieces of if our car is breaking down, rather than pouring more money into repairs each year, we want to save up money for a new version, something new, something electric or something. We have to make investments in, I'm not saying buildings, I'm not making that analogy, investments in something else.
Right.
Alternatives to incarceration, and enhanced rehabilitation, education, healthcare services, to restore and not repeat the issues. So no, we're on the same. We absolutely are on the same thing. I haven't been able to figure out how we close jails first and then invest in community services after that, cart before horse, and who's willing to have the political courage and foresight to organize and unify at least a model in one county. Except Belfast has done more with that than any of the other 15. And maybe watering the green grass, we help build that out to an even more robust model that perhaps other counties can replicate. Now that doesn't help Hancock County in the moment, or Puerto Rico in the moment. But I think there are some success stories that we can look to nationally, and maybe even locally, that we would want to showcase, highlight.
This is not rocket science. Some things are complicated, but this is not rocket science. We know what works. We know what works. When we have non-law enforcement professionals arrive at the scene of many of these calls, we know there are fewer police-involved shootings because the police aren't there to shoot anyone. And that's a real problem in Maine. Police-involved shootings of people who are mentally ill. It's a real problem, particularly in the last year or two. Significant problem. And we know the outcomes can be better. Again, if you're not familiar with Cahoots, CAHOOTS, you are, well, I know, but if others are not, Google Cahoots. It's been ongoing for about 30 years. And there were fewer arrests because there's no one there to arrest, fewer deaths, fewer shootings because there's no one there with a gun. And again, research how we are defaulting more and more to arresting people. And the police don't have to arrest people when they show up. They have, again, a range of options. They can do nothing. They can show up and talk and try to resolve the situation. They can issue a citation, which is what actually happens when you go to jail. If you bail yourself out, you get the citation to go to court. So they can issue the citation right on the spot, you know, a ticket, basically, show up in court. Or eventually, you get up to arrest. We don't have to arrest as many people. And then, AG offices, DA offices, district attorney's offices, they don't have to prosecute every crime. And they don't have to set bail at a point where people can't afford it. And on and on and on it goes. But we have way too many people arrested, way too many people in jail. And we should change, obviously some of that has to do with changing laws too. So yeah, we're all at fault. We're all at fault.
So we're back in, this political mode of tough on crime because there's so much crime. The tough on crime thing is coming back. I'm sorry, Shemaya, go ahead.
I just wanted to say Chrissy looked like she had something to say.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
How about you, Chrissy?
I was just gonna say, being in law enforcement and dealing with different situations, and I don't really know how work at the state level or anything like that, but based on experience, I guess law enforcement officers react to what's happening. I don't know what kind of law enforcement officers. I don't know people's levels. I know it's hard to be in an officer's shoes and be like, oh, it's easy to just give a ticket. Why didn't they just do that? Because I think like that a lot. But then I have to really sit back and be like, okay, if it's just me and I'm it's just me dealing with someone who maybe has mental issues that I don't know about and they attack me, they're probably going to go in cuffs and I'm going to process them because I don't know what's going on. And I don't have any backup. I don't have anyone to help me. I don't have that experience. So that's another reason why maybe people are being arrested that have the mental health issues because we're not equipped to deal with that. And law enforcement officers do not want to deal with that. If there was something out there where they were like, you're getting sent with this person, this mental health person, no law enforcement officer would say, no, we don't want that. We don't need that. We'd be like, yes, thank you. But I'm not going to say no law enforcement officers out there and, inexperienced and, do bad things. There are bad cops. There are good cops. So, I think it's just a case of just me from my experience. If I'm being attacked by someone, I got to do what I got to do. I have a family, so.
And as a continuation, thank you for that, Chrissy. As a continuation, what I haven't heard yet, we often don't hear yet, is what are the voices of victims in this discussion? What do they have to say about accountability, incarceration of those who have been harmed?
It's interesting. it's interesting
not
about
str-
victims.
it's not only the relationship between the police officer making a decision to arrest or summons or find some other alternative to resolve the issue.
Yeah.
Quite often, even when it comes to unhoused, to the homeless, it's a citizen who's scared because someone's sleeping camped out at the front door of the little shop they're trying to open. And there's a scary man there, and they call the police to deal with the scary person.
Yeah.
And
Who often though isn't scary. I mean,
well,
the citizen
right.
may perceive it that way, but and I was interesting. I was at a Zoom event last night. There's a gentleman named Alex Vitale who wrote a book, The End of Policing, and I recommend it. I haven't read it all, but I recommend it in terms of opening our thinking up to a whole variety. It doesn't mean you have to agree with his premise even, or his conclusions, but yeah, we have so many problems in our society that we treat as a policing or a law enforcement issue, when we really have to start treating it as a health issue. And we need people in law enforcement to lead the way, to say, no, don't increase my budget by 12% next year. Give that money to the public health agency. Give that money elsewhere.
But should we put in funding for maybe adequate training for law enforcement?
Yeah.
Because some people, they're just unaware. You think of law enforcement, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna go get the bad guys, but it's not always the bad guys. But this is the mentality of a lot of people. The police officers get the bad guys.
Yeah. No, I've been fighting for years now for two things. One, everybody who works in a jail and every police officer, and there's been a law change on this since I started my little personal campaign. Every police officer, law enforcement officer, everyone who works in a jail should be trained in mental health care. There's a mental health. Obviously, there's some police departments that do better than others on crisis intervention, CIT. There's a mental health first aid training. It's just an 8-hour training. I've taken it. It can be valuable to the officer just in his own or her own life to deal with mental health issues. And there has been a law change on that. But when I was in jail, I watched corrections officers, and I put that in quotes because they're not correcting anything. That's the way it is. They're not correcting anything in a jail. But those guards, I prefer guards, those guards treated the people with mental illness in one of the jails I was in, Penobscot County Jail, as though they were freaks in a freak show. And I will never, ever forget it. And until I hear of better treatment, I will never let it go until I die. Everyone in law enforcement and corrections needs to be trained in mental health care. Bottom line, I mean, as a starting point. So you're right, more training and fewer police going to calls where the issue is someone's unhoused, someone is in crisis. We don't want police there, and police say they don't want to go. So we got to work together and make it so it doesn't happen. As I say, in Bangor, hopefully we're going to get this BCAT program, Bangor Citizen Assistance Team, going. Because again, we've been so backwards. Yes, in our funding at the state level, backward. It's astonishing what we spend on our prisons and our jails in Maine, our 15 jails and our prisons. It's astonishing. What a waste of resources and human potential. Because you may have you met anyone who has an aspiration of breaking into people's homes to steal stuff, to sell it, to buy more heroin. I've never met anyone who aspired to that. That person is sick and should not be sitting in a jail cell or a prison cell getting worse, because that person's going to get out again. And that person's going to live next to Noel. And unless something else happens, that person's going to break into Noel's house to steal something, to sell it, to buy more heroin. And that is the cycle we have created. When I got out of jail, I've said the only thing jails are consistently good at is preparing people to go back to jail. And damn it, that is true.
And for giving society a break from the offender behavior that got them there in the first place.
Well,
You'll hear judges say this to give society a breather from your repeat behaviors.
Yeah, and you know what I said
I
to
could just jump in a minute and say that, we have a protocol in this chat group where we let people finish their complete thoughts and sentences.
Oh, yeah.
And that's part of, I don't know, did we go over that when we first got on, Shamaya? When we had, I don't know if we put that up. So maybe we should go over it now just to get the protocol down again because of new people.
I'm the guy who's interrupting, and I got to go in 2 minutes, but I'll remember it. I'll remember it.
Thank you. And thank you, Becky, for bringing that up.
And I do get passionate because unless you've lived in a jail, unless you've actually lived in a jail, I don't believe it's possible to even understand what that's like. And that's, again, why I tell my friends who are in the legislature and other places, you have to go to jail. You have to go through the process and see what it's like and see how people are treated. And I would say, Noel, and in terms of the break you said of giving society a break, I've said to Mark Hathaway, when I told him, about the drop in the number of people in Penobscot County Jail at the beginning of COVID, and I said, I didn't hear about a crime wave breakout during that time. And he said, well, no, there wasn't a crime wave, but some of our businesses have complained about, maybe more broken windows or something. And I said, you know what? You send that person to jail, you might get a break. When that person gets out, they're not going to break one window. They're going to break 2 windows because they're worse off. That's what happens. You might give society a break, but when they get back out and they're worse off, worse things happen. We're not doing it right.
So funding alternatives to incarceration, I think, is absolutely essential, and providing for resources in the moment, in crisis and in response. Absolutely. But in terms of the staffing of how many police, how many corrections, these departments are all woefully understaffed. Cumberland County, for example, has 150 correctional personnel. They're down to 75.
Yep.
They've closed entire pods and have stopped taking prisoners because they have no staff. And that staff that is there are mandated to work up to 80 hours per week. And it's imploding. So there's not an abundance of police and corrections officers, quite the opposite.
No, I agree.
There's I said earlier today, Doug, that of the 3,500 police officer positions, including troopers, deputies, game wardens, everyone, there are, last I knew, there are over 200 vacancies among those 3,500. So, and that's a national thing. Minneapolis typically has 900 police officers. They're down like 560 now. And it's causing a tremendous problem with overwork, workers' comp injuries, stress, mental health stress within the workforce of policing. And it's a true crisis within the profession. I've interviewed hundreds of applicants for policing and corrections in my 40 years. And to a person, and I believe the majority of them, if I don't, it goes no farther. But to a person, when I ask the question, why do you want to serve in this department, this position, they answer with one of 2 answers. Can you guess what those are? Why do you want to be a police officer? Because, anyone?
I want to help people.
That's number 1. And they want to make a difference.
Sure. Yeah.
And those that come to us who clearly possess a spirit of adventure rather than a spirit of service, I immediately kind of put on the back burner because we have enough action heroes. We need more people who possess a spirit of service and view this role as one in its traditional sense. And that is that the police officer is a peacekeeper. If you're looking for the enemy, going after the bad guys, as Chrissy said earlier. If you're a warrior looking for the enemy, you look for the enemy. If you're a peacekeeper, you look for allies. And that's the strength. The threads of the fabric of community include all of us. And that the police are not the problem. However, our society reluctance to fund the social service rehabilitation and intervention resources has left it to the last people standing, the police, to handle everything from a cat up a tree to juvenile, to truancy, to marriage disputes, and the stuff they don't want to do.
Yeah.
And this is the corner we've been painted into. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just going to come back to the community liaison structure that the folks in Waldo County have been doing such good work with, because it feels like it makes a path for what you both have been talking about. That how do we move from a system that is not working, that's partly because people in law enforcement have all this stuff piled on them that's not appropriate to their original job. Becky, can you go on mute just for a second because it's making crazy feedback? Thank you. And then I'll turn it over to you. I just think that it gives us a concrete path right here, that the more we can start to shift those resources, which is about how do we fund a community liaison program? How do we get buy-in from law enforcement in different areas? Like in Hancock County, the Sheriff Kane, who was perhaps going to have come to our meeting today, wasn't able to do that, but he sent his regards. And he has felt like that's not feasible for Hancock County. And it feels like it takes more folks from law enforcement to have that conversation to work out, oh, how could this work?
Law enforcement and their bosses.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to realize law enforcement doesn't make the rules. Law enforcement does what society hands them. And, the sheriff doesn't go out and round up prisoners. I mean, there's the police, there's the courts, there's so it's a lot to unpack and recalibrate, which I'm all about.
Yep. And Becky.
So, I mean, would you be
I'm sorry.
interested in having Waldo County do a bit of a presentation? Or
They did. We have
a
a recording that I can send you the link to. They did a wonderful presentation about how they do what they do, both with the chief deputy.
Trundy.
Yes, Jason Trundy, and the community liaison officer, Rob Porter. And so you can see that they did a beautiful job of explaining how they made that work and how they continue to make it work.
Becky?
I just wanted to jump in on Belfast. And so part of the community was long before, or maybe as the restorative justice thing. I think it's 15 years old. But I know that there was a toy store two owners who owned a toy store, and they devoted the top part of their toy store for a place. This must have been 25 years ago. This was before the restorative justice program came in. So and they hired, I think, out of first their own dollars and then out of community dollars, donations, for leaders to be there so that kids could come after school and play games. That's all they did. And so what I'm trying to say is there was a willingness from the community to see an alternative, and they were willing to put money into it. Anyway.
Yeah,
I think that's possible
right.
somehow.
There are ideas for how to go forward.
Cumberland County also has a model. They have confinement counselors on staff within the facility and a pre-release center that helps the step down and reintegration to re-enter as well. And that's of course, a larger metropolitan area as far as Maine's concerned, right? And have more resources because they have more tax base than we do. But there are models to look at to build upon, is what I'm saying. I'm saying that that's the solution or the holy grail, but to build upon that breaks away from this linear serve your time and leave, and there's no improvement in your condition. Now, listen, there are some people who don't want to improve and just are incapable of it for whatever reason. And I cannot influence that, but there are plenty of people who do. And yes, finding examples of better ways to approach and address, I think, are numerous. And if it's something that this group would be interested in seeking out and holding up to, is your area Hancock County? Is that your
Yes.
sort
Yep.
of your, right,
That is
your-
our area
can't
specifically.
solve the world, but Hancock, right?
Yeah.
And see who you might have for allies. Peacekeepers look for allies.
Mhm.
With political influence, whether it's your state representative, state senator, any county commissioners have any interest in what this group is doing at all?
One of them has been on our mailing list regularly, but has not come to meetings. And he used to send little emails, and we haven't heard from him for quite a while. But it's a good point about the political leaders to get them
Yeah.
included in this.
Through my day job at Eastern Maine Development Corporation, these days my role is, the title is Recovery and Reentry Workforce Specialist. So at Eastern Maine Development Corporation, I spent the last 3.5 years helping people in recovery or reentering from jails and prisons, or people who have had other challenges, access education, training, and employment. And so I deal every day with people who are unhoused, who are trying to get their life back together again. And there's a couple of places I guess I was going with that. But, one is people who go into jail, as I said before, come out worse off. We're not making people better. We're making things worse. It exacerbates our unhoused population. People get out, and again, often had an apartment and it's gone. So incarcerating people often makes things worse. We see it in our recidivism rate. We wonder why so many people go back to jail and prison. Yeah, again, it's because we're doing things wrong, but there was something else I was going to point out. Oh, I want to get back to one thing and I got to go, but this is such a fascinating discussion because this is what I spend all my free time doing, just about, is somehow related to these issues. Is when people say police departments are maybe underfunded or not funded enough, when was the last time some entity, like the Bangor City Council or even the state legislature, really did a thorough analysis of how much should we be spending on a police budget? The process in Bangor that I've watched for a few years is the budget comes in, people who don't really know much about law enforcement pretty much say, you need 7% more, or whatever it is. Okay. How in the hell do we know if that's right? Maybe we don't need that much. As a society, we've got to decide. Maybe we don't need to spend that much. We're down 30 officers on a particular, maybe we don't need those 30 officers. Maybe we can live without them. Who really knows how much we should be spending because we don't analyze it carefully. There's an annual process, it happens at the state legislature too. Agencies, departments come up with their budget and, so, and the last thing I was going to say about legislators and other legal and other folks, legislators and others, or law enforcement, police, county commissioners, or try to get them to come to meetings like this. They don't. In my job, I'm in all kinds of county meetings that have to do with substance use disorder, the legal system, mental health care challenges. Most counties have one or more groups that meet. And every time I go to them, just about, I say, where are the elected officials? Where are your town councilors? Where are your county commissioners? Where's your police chief? Where is your sheriff? They're not part of these discussions. And that's a problem.
And that's part of what we've been working on, and finding that it's really about the connection process. And I send a lot of little emails. It contributes to people coming. It didn't pan out as much today as it has sometimes, but we are making some progress with that, and we can turn that more towards some of the government folks running government. And I just want to say we are over our time, and we haven't heard from Suzanne at all. And before we end, I just wanted to check and see, Suzanne, if you have thoughts you might want to share from all this.
Thank you, Shemaya. I've been sitting here enjoying listening to everyone and hearing all this stuff come out and taking some notes and making connections in my own brain about, okay, this is what we need to do, this, and appreciating the perspectives and the complexity. And yesterday I was at the Zoomed at the Maine Civil Rights Commission, where they were talking about indigent legal services. And there were two people, Doug, on that panel that were actual people that have been in prison, and listening to what those two folks had to say about it just dovetails with all that you've said and with all these larger issues. And so I think there's a way to start getting this, put out. As Becky talks about, we need to educate the public. And I see some real possibilities here for getting information out and pulling stuff together. So I'm really excited. And thank you all so much for what you've said today.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Okay.
And Noel, I wondered if you would like to have the last word before we all say goodbye.
I want to tell you sincerely how much I appreciate everyone here. Maine is, I think, particularly blessed to have grassroots people who are neighbors and friends and colleagues be able to have these kinds of conversations. There are precious few of them, but when people do bootstrap and sign up and sign in and have these meetings and share their time, which is precious for all of us, I think it's a good thing. And as I'm processing our discussion here and what might be helpful to your group, and seeing what I can do to help facilitate perhaps some kind of an open forum where I can use my own Rolodex of invitees to come and sit and discuss. And because Doug makes a great point about there's no, I don't think, a meaningful assessment or analysis of government services, what we, the customer, are paying for, and how well is that being spent, and are there better ways to build the mousetrap since we're paying for it? And I think that's a very valuable discussion to have, and we need to have that with county commissioners, legislators, and so forth, those who are in, and judges, and have the judicial and legislative branches as well as executive with we the people. And not sound like too much of a patriot, but this is what we are. We're a grassroots community. According to Forbes, no, not Forbes, U.S. News and World Reports, the last, and I'll send you the link, last 4 years now of all 50 states on a number of metrics, because U.S. News and World Reports measures the best universities, best college athletic program, the best science program, the best state to retire to, the best city for young people, so on and so forth. They came up with the 1 through 50 states safest through least safe. Last 4 years in a row, Maine has been #1 safest for all the metrics that they've put together. And we have something to be proud of here. And if there's any place that we can make movement towards a better system, I think it's Maine. I think it'd be very hard to do in Florida, it'd be very hard to do in other states. So let me give that some thought about how I might be able to be helpful, have the University of Maine Augusta be helpful in that. And also, I'll tell you, the Maine Municipal Association has hosted 3 now community forums around community policing. And town managers and so forth all get invited to this. And it's pretty rich. And it helps flesh out, because we need to know more. We know what our passions are and our priorities and our agenda. I've heard it from Doug. I've heard it from Chrissy and so forth. And part of mine is also helping to understand, help have the public understand policing, not solely, but because it is also misunderstood. COVID, heart attack, and suicide are the top 3 causes of death in American law enforcement officers. COVID, heart attack, and suicide. And murders are up 59%, according to a BBC article this past year, of American police officers. 59% more are being murdered. And that doesn't even measure up to COVID, heart attack, and suicide. There's a lot of pressure on the people that we entrust. We give this public trust to do the public's work in being collaborative, thoughtful, proactive, preventative guardians, which should be our expectation of them. And we hired these young people, typically younger people, into this profession, say they want to help people, they want to make a difference, and we employ them into systems where they're able to do neither. It's wildly frustrating to them and disillusioning. And we owe it to our guardians and our firefighters, our paramedics, our health and human service people to give them the best possible landscape within which to operate. So there's like my little sermonette, but I believe in what you're doing and I appreciate each of you. Wish Chris you were back on here, I'd say. Fair winds, following seas to that coasting. But I'll sign up here and I'll get you a little more information, send that out through Shemaya, maybe to share it to the group.
You can send it to me and I can share it with the group.
Yeah, and let's do this again.
Yeah,
Great.
and thank you.
Thank you
ever
all
so much. Thank you, Doug, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you,
listening.
Noel, for coming
you.
to talk with us. And I think it's wonderful that you have ideas about how we might go forward with continuing some of the discussion that's come up today. So we can look forward to that.
And another day,
Okay.
we could talk about the principles of community-oriented policing.
Yes.
For Robert Peel, who really what's at the foundation of being a peacekeeper.
Yep.
That'd be great.
That sounds
Thank you all.
great.
Have a good weekend.
Yep.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.